Hey everyone, welcome to the Frorefront. Last week I uploaded a video going over the Switch 2 and the community's reaction to the pricing.
That's more than I would usually pay.
Today we'll discuss, is Nintendo losing their identity, what a Switch 2 edition game is, and the ups and downs with that, and personal anecdotal updates that hopefully gives you a better idea of this channel and why I want you to come along. But first, one final note on the pricing of Mario Kart World. If we go to Nintendo's website and check out Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Booster Course Pass, it's $85, right? And how much money are we spending on Mario Kart World again? $80. So it's $25 for the Booster Course Pass. So are we willing to spend $85 on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Booster Course Pass? And you can note right here, it comes with 48 additional courses. That is a lot. That's a lot of tracks. You be the judge. Would you pay that much? Did you pay that much for the Booster Course Pass, or did you just buy the game and not bother with the $25 add-on? So a lot of people are saying Mario Kart is due for some kind of change, and I wouldn't disagree. I felt that way back during the Nintendo 64 days. Mario Kart was still new. It was cool to see Mario in 3D or pseudo 3D. And then the jump to GameCube, he went full 3D. Everything was 3D. The characters, courses, and everything. What I didn't like about the GameCube version, and I know this is a hot take because most people like Double Dash, is there were only 16 courses. And that was the norm back then. It was 16 courses every game. Whopping 3 that had come out. Honestly, I would say that's only 15 courses because the GameCube version is the one that had Baby Park. And that was like less than half of a level. And I hated it. So I don't hate many Mario Kart stages. And so for something that cost, Google says $60 at the time. Honestly, I don't remember. I thought it was $50. But you're paying $50 to $60 for a game with 15 courses. That was such a steep ask, in my opinion. And I was disappointed, but I was glad to see the Wii and the DS version take a turn and have 32 courses from then on, 16 retro and 16 new. So with all that out of the way, let's move on. Is Nintendo losing their identity? That's been a topic that's come up in a few videos, at least since a week or so back. And the topic's changed since then, of course. It's come up a little bit. But I want to start with the Switch 2 reveal, right? I was in the camp that it was going to be different. I think, GameCube to Wii, GBA to DS, 3DS, and the Wii U over to the Switch. In my mind, Nintendo switched up their game every single generation. And more on that in a minute. But, there were leaks coming out that third-party manufacturers were making accessories for the Switch 2 before the Switch 2 even revealed. It wasn't even leaks. Like, they were straight up at conventions showing off their accessories for the Switch 2. Again, before the Switch 2 revealed, right? And I was so skeptical about it. I was like, there's no way. It looks just like any of these portable PCs coming out. It looks like a Switch again. There's no way they're going to repeat that. Why would they do that, right? And there's a lot of reasons why they would do that. But, at the time, I could totally see, at the time, Nintendo totally throwing us a curveball. And the biggest reason for that was, Mario Kart Wonder released just a year before, same with Tears of the Kingdom. And I was thinking, okay, that's the Switch's swan song. I do feel a little bit different about the end of a console generation than most. I feel like, it's good when developers and publishers and companies support a console that has the most install base, because that should show off the console's biggest potential, right? And, all the games that have come before it have come up to this. Well, that's how I felt about Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom. And I was thinking, okay, well, the next console, it's going to do something different where we can't just have an even bigger and better version of the last one. It's going to do something like the Wii did, where you have a remote control instead of a controller, or it would change up how we played it. You could go portably or on your TV. So anyway, I never analyzed my opinion until I saw RGT85's video. So here's a video from his channel about Nintendo losing their identity. I think he had a lot of great opinions, and he didn't really have a specific opinion on that question, is Nintendo losing their identity. He more came from a different, third perspective. It's a great video. Give it a watch. Here's a clip.
Of this spectrum of thought process. So, losing your identity. To play devil's advocate here, let's look at the last time, we thought of the identity of a company like PlayStation or Xbox. Because honestly, I feel like PlayStation and Xbox have had a larger identity change since 2019 than Nintendo has. And I think most people would agree with that. when you look at what
And he goes on to make some great points with Xbox and Sony. If you haven't checked out his video, definitely do so. What I want to focus on, is Nintendo here. And I'm not just going to be an exclusive Nintendo channel. That's what I started with last week. That's what I'm going to start with in this video and kind of lead into some other things later on. But, you have Nintendo to Super Nintendo, right? What was a Super Nintendo? A beefier Nintendo. Game Boy to Game Boy Color. You could argue that's just a beefier Game Boy. 3DS to new 3DS. Quick aside, how many more exclusives does a PS5 have than a new 3DS? I'll give you a minute. I actually don't know the answer, but if you said less than 10, I think you'd be about right. Like, honestly, yeah, you have some exclusives on PS5 that come to PC later, so I don't know if you'd want to count those, but that gets into a whole other argument I want to save for another video, and that is, what is the point of buying the newest consoles if you can play all of them on the console you bought in the generation before? There was a few podcasters a few years ago that speculated when, I guess more than a few years ago now, when the Xbox Series S and X were announced, is that the future of consoles, right? After the Series X, we're going to get a Series Z or something that's a little bit more powerful, that the Series S could still play, and so on. But honestly, look at the PS4 and the PS5, and then now let's watch what the Switch and Switch 2 do. And from what I said before, I'm not meaning to crack on Sony again. Like, honestly, I probably couldn't even tell you how many exclusives Xbox has on Series S and X. I'm pretty sure every single release has also come out on Xbox One. Like, no exaggeration. Or at least, I definitely know they've released many of those, if not all of them, on Game Pass. And if you can't play them on Xbox One, you can stream them to Xbox One. So I guess that'll be a bit of foreshadowing for the end of the video. I'm hoping to be, you hear a lot of opinions online, especially the Switch 2 recently, where, all these people are against the pricing and everything. Well, the mass audience seems like pre-orders are selling out, right? So even though there's a lot of pushback on the price, apparently the bigger audience outnumbers and possibly massively outnumbers people against the prices of the Switch 2. So sorry, I got way off track. So the point is, Nintendo has always been iterative and has always innovated. But to define iterative, it's basically involving repetition, often with a goal of improvement or refinement, right? So iterative isn't necessarily a bad thing. There have always been generations that have been iterative, and then there have been some that were innovative. If we look at Nintendo 64 to GameCube, they made changes with the small disc. GBA to DS with the dual screen. RGT 85 mentioned the Wii. And the reason I bring up PS4 to PS5 and then Xbox One, the series, are the other console manufacturers really necessary in doing these things? And I think that's why you see the biggest identity change with these console manufacturers, especially Microsoft really heavily investing in Game Pass and porting their games to other systems, including the PS5, and they've announced the Switch 2. So to summarize, because I'm even listening back to what I just said, and I really want to re-record everything, the innovative part of Nintendo, I would argue, is GBA to DS, is N64 to GameCube. The iterative ones, I would say, would be the Nintendo to Super Nintendo, the Game Boy to Game Boy Color. Iterative, yes, but they massively improve on what came before. So does this answer the question, is Nintendo losing their identity? What do you think? Leave a comment down below. Personally, I think no, and I'm really glad I watched RGT85's video about this, because it made me question my original stance.
And I always said they should take the Switch 2 and kind of model it after Super Nintendo. That's what it feels like to me. And even though this isn't their very first time doing a sequel to a console, it just felt right with the Switch 2 being like a super Switch. So I love that they're leaning into that.
So this leads to our next topic. What is a Switch 2 edition game? So basically what I can tell is if there's small improvements to the original Switch version, it's $70. If there's significant improvements to the point of maybe even calling it DLC, but it's exclusive to the Switch 2, $80. So Good Vibes Gaming had a really good video recently speculating what future Switch 2 editions could be announced or unveiled. And I think it's a great concept. Here's a few clips.
But for another game that's similar, but also doesn't quite appeal to me, but I think a lot of people would want to see it. Animal Crossing: New Horizons. People wanted extra content for that game. I think a Switch 2 version adds in maybe some of the extra modes from New Leaf or some ideas. Let's get Puzzle League in there.
Yeah.
I think that makes it
Hell yeah.
10 times better. All that extra stuff that we've seen from the past games, just get it in the game as well. And here you go. Here's some new content for you Animal Crossing fans that you've been desperately wanting for God knows how many years now.
Another easy, obvious one. I'm going to go back into the Zelda well for this one. In this case, it's not one that's on the confirmed list yet, but it's such an obvious one. Age of Calamity. Obviously, with Age of Imprisonment coming, maybe you don't need it quite as soon. But personally, at least where we are now, Age of Calamity is still my favorite Hyrule Warriors game, or actually really any Nintendo Warriors game. I really loved Age of Calamity, even despite the horrific performance issues. And really, it's a Warriors game and already has tons of content. This is one of those obvious ones where really all you need to do is just bump up that performance. And in this case, bump it up by a lot. We all know.
So I think Derek and Ash bring up some great games there. Of course, they're my personal choices. Age of Calamity was a lot better than I was expecting. I had bought Hyrule Warriors and then Hyrule Warriors Legends. I bought 2 or 3 versions of that game. And then when Age of Calamity came out, I was totally blindsided by it. I do wish that game was a little bit more canon, but it was a lot of fun. I like the more story-based structure to it. So this new Switch 2 sequel, I'll be looking forward to whenever, down the line, whenever I do look into getting a Switch 2 and getting a game. I'll definitely be keeping my eyes on that one. And then Animal Crossing, right? Me and my wife both were expecting some kind of sequel to be announced for the Switch 2, and that didn't happen. So some kind of update to New Horizons might pull us back in. It's definitely one of those games where once you're in it, and when you're out, you're totally out. I don't know how difficult it would be to get back in it. Have you played games like Animal Crossing? When you go back, do you stay in for a while, or is it just to see how many weeds have grown in your town and to see what townspeople are still there, and do you kind of bow out after a day or two, if that? Along with those, I would love to see some kind of update or additional something to the Mario RPG remake. I don't know if I'd want that to be just a few updates here, pay the $10 upgrade, or if they added stuff to it. I honestly would love to see it. Now, I wasn't disappointed with the remake on the Switch, but to see like an additional area, bosses, I'm all for it. I would love to see something like that. And that's the one benefit to it, right? There's definitely a section of the gaming community that's speaking out against the $70 to $80 Switch 2 editions because, oh, look, instead of having Game Selects that, sells older games as they should be sold for less, for like $20 or $30 editions, instead, they're finding little excuses, one could argue, to keep the value high for selling you something that's 8 to 9 years old, give or take a few years. But if you have any games that you'd like to see updated, whether that be, Xbox, PlayStation, or Switch, doesn't even have to be a Switch 2 edition, what would you want to see? So that leads us to the last portion of this video, and that is my personal anecdotal updates for the channel and why I want you to come along. So I'm really hoping my perspective is a bit more unique. I know I didn't share any stories about my kids in this video, but I'm a married man, I'm a dad, I've got 2 young kids, and while you hear YouTubers sometimes mention that they have kids, and honestly, it's always a shock to me. I'm like, whoa, they have time to upload daily videos, keep up with gaming, and they have kids. It absolutely blows my mind. So my point is, we hear about the vocal minority online, right? Like we think we're the majority, but we're definitely not. And I'm thinking maybe my voice can come from like the voices that aren't spoken that much, but they speak with their wallets. Again, I want to direct this to, the success of the Switch 2 pre-orders. No, I was not one of the people that pre-ordered it. No, I will not be pre-ordering that. I've never pre-ordered a console. But back to my point, here's some highlights of some videos I listened to this week. I hope you enjoy. So I know I'm sticking with one channel, and honestly, this is my only highlight. I'm running out of time. I keep trying to make these videos 10 minutes, and they keep going on longer. But they have a great series called Top 10 Greatest Games According to You. Definitely check them out. You can vote for the next console in their community tab. Go vote. And I really enjoyed this interaction from John. Check it out.
At number 10, Resident Evil 4.
We have to beat someone up. There's no way.
What?
Again,
Uh-oh.
this was
Uh-oh.
this was a game that was affected by the push of another game. It's always in the top 10, but it was hovering around 7 or 8, and then got pushed down.
This is actually not acceptable. I think people don't understand. They got their numbers the wrong way round. They meant 1, they put 10. It's an easy mistake. Yeah, we're gonna have to beat them up, all of them.
Just as a baseline for points, though, 5,692.
Hey, that's good. Let's move on. I'm mad.
John's already mad.
I'm scared. We immediately disappointed John. Now I don't know how I feel.
How dare you? You all disappointed John.
All right, guys. So what were your top 10 GameCube games, or what was your top 3? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think people are out of their mind for paying $85 basically for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? And what are your thoughts on the Switch 2's identity, or Nintendo's identity, or does it even matter to you? Now, I'm going to try to super edit this last part. I do play Marvel Snap here and there. Again, kind of a side effect of not having much time to play games between whatever I'm doing. And, you know, to preface, I'm probably going to say this in a few other videos, but my wife works full-time, right? That's a big differentiating factor. You know, both parents work full-time, and we have young kids that rely on us. And I cannot, you know, describe how difficult, but how rewarding that is. And so just real quick with Marvel Snap, one of the best card games, by the way, I've ever played. I highly recommend. Please ignore the shop, and when they try to charge you $100 for a stupid card, just ignore it. There's other ways to get it. You can go fully free to play. You can save up the currencies. You can play one type of card. You know, like Magic the Gathering has black, green, red, all this stuff. Pokemon trading card has you know, water types and stuff. You can just focus on one type for free, and you'll be totally fine. I did that at the start. I did the discard type and the move type, and I've really moved towards the move type a lot. Now, discard has a lot going for it. That's a whole thing. I need to stop ranting. Just so to briefly describe to you what's going on in this. I love Frigga. So Frigga, she'll duplicate the last card you played. I love her in every single type of deck. And what I love about her in move is you're going to see I'm going to move Vulture quite a few times. It's like a domino effect. Hercules is going to bounce a card that was moved to that location. Iron Fist moves a card. Arana is activate. Aranya, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. But and activate means you play her. She will not do the effect that turn. You have to activate her later. So the downside of that is if you draw her on the last turn, she's useless. Thankfully, that never happens to me, which is unlike my Dark Phoenix deck, where I always draw Dark Phoenix on the last turn, but that's a whole other story. So, as you'll see, I bounce Vulture back constantly. Vulture gains +6 power when he's moved. So, you'd think I'd want to figure that, but I don't. And I do something else instead. And the reason I'm showing you this video is because I'm level 99 here. It's the second time I've reached level 100. And I started playing over 2 years ago. And the first time I hit level 100, it felt like a Goku moment, right? It felt like I was achieving the next power level, or I was achieving the next Super Saiyan form. And it was awesome. Really wish I recorded it. But I did record this one. And you know, you're going to notice there's a location that you're not allowed to play in this location. So obviously, since I'm doing move, I kind of have an advantage. So I'm surprised my opponent didn't run. But here's how it goes. And there's how it went. I did play back at 1.5 times speed, and I cut out some of the time I was waiting for my opponent to play. And mobile games aren't everyone's cup of tea, so I spun through it really fast. Again, let me know what you thought in the comments below. I'm going to wrap up this video before it gets over 20 minutes long. And as my final outro, are you a parent? What games have you been playing on the side? How have you had time for them? What do you think about anything mentioned in the video? Have a great one, guys.